Welcome, everyone. My name is Aaron Houghton. I'm the creator of Founders First, where founders thrive. And as many of you know, at Founders First, we're intensely focused on wellness and mental health for founders and entrepreneurs and how we can get to the resilience that makes us stronger, happier, and more successful. And today we have with us Ryan Eleuteri, founder and CEO of Charleston Bloody Mary Mix. Let me tell you a little bit about Ryan and why we're so excited about this conversation. After graduating from the College of Charleston, a city we all know and love in the South, one of my favorite cities in the US, Ryan spent some time in sales. He then one day had an idea to create a better Bloody Mary mix. Charleston Bloody Mary Mix started in his kitchen, and in the years he was in the early years he was selling his mix out of his truck, just making it happen. So now, after a decade of hard work, his bottles are in over 6,000 retail locations. They're in 16 states across the US, yet nationally outsell all but 4 other brands. They've won more awards than we can count and are now the #1 selling craft Bloody Mary mix in the country. So Ryan, yours is the kind of entrepreneur story that we all love. Thank you for being with us today. And we're just so glad you're here and can't wait to hear more about your story.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Dan, for setting this up. Looking forward to talking with you.
So I want to just put a message out to everyone who's joining us here. I'll start us off with a couple of questions, and we would love questions from the audience, and we've built in some time at the end. So as you think of a question along the way, go ahead and drop it into chat, and you can send it to everybody or just to me if you want, or to Ian, our host, and we'll pick those up after a couple questions here. So drop them in when you think of them, and I'll remind us and have another call as we get close to the end for questions from the audience. So please dig in. So Ryan, you've had this great journey. You had an idea, you found a way to make it happen, and now you've had this great success and this massive operation, honestly, behind you. In Founders First, we focus on the journey and the challenges that entrepreneurs face along the way. Well, every entrepreneur's journey is different. We know that many of these difficulties are really the same across us as founders and entrepreneurs. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how this idea came to you and where you were in your life when you decided that this was something you wanted to do. So you mentioned to me you were working at a car dealership, and then one day you just walked out. So what made you take the leap?
So yeah, I went to college at Charleston, graduated from there, and I was not very smart with credit card debt and probably my spending habits. So as soon as I graduated, I had to get a job right away. So I had a friend that was working at a car dealership about a mile away from downtown Charleston. So I got a job there working in sales, and it was a great job, great money. But I ended up being there. It was supposed to be a 2-year gig, and things were going so well that I just, every 1 year turned into another and turned into another. And during that time period, we had a lot. Charleston's a fun city, always had some great nights out, and our go-to mix in the morning was always the same mix. And so one morning we go to the grocery store closer to Folly Beach out here in Charleston, and our go-to mix is gone. It's off the shelf. It's sold out. So we buy a few of the other brands, me and some buddies, off the shelf, and we get back to my house on James Island, and we're making up Bloody Marys. And as it tends to happen with a group of friends together that are consuming some beverages, the ideas start flowing. We should do this together. We should do this together. And one of the ideas that came up, and this was coincidentally right when Firefly sweet tea vodka had just gotten really big. And one of the ideas that came up was, hey, if Firefly can do it, and we don't like these Bloody Mary mixes that we're drinking, why don't we just come up with our own Bloody Mary mix? Mm-hmm. So that was a Sunday. Monday morning, go back to reality. And, it was a few of my friends, we were joking about it, but I'm sitting there at the sales desk and, not really on the path that I envisioned myself in life, and I decide with one friend that, hey, let's really look into this. So we find a place in Charleston that can bottle it for us. I get a neighbor across the street to design the label, and we're literally brewing this up in my kitchen. So from there, start selling it to some restaurants. We get a production facility, driving around Charleston. Yeah, it's in the back of my car, trying to sell restaurants on it. And same time, I'm still working the dealership job. And, we eventually hit a point with the dealership where I had 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Me and the boss man kind of had it out one day, and it was my Jerry Maguire moment where I'm like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm taking the goldfish. And that's when it became a full-time career. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to full-time make this the better Bloody Mary mix and just put everything into it. That's how it started.
That's how it starts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to dig in on the dream a bit. So like you're actually starting this thing, and like so many of our members have started companies on their own. Some of us many times, right? It's a kind of a common path for entrepreneurs. So the idea of struggling to get off the ground is, I think, familiar to a lot of us, right? Like, having two jobs, having 1 foot in the startup, having 1 foot in, the way that you're paying the bills, loading things in your truck, trying to pitch them to people when nobody's ever heard of it before. You told me about some of the challenges you were faced with, kind of wondering if this was going to work out before you really started to scale it. We'd love to hear about what that dream was when you first started, like what you imagined this was going to be, and maybe some of the times you had doubts or started to realize how big of a project this was going to be as you're getting started.
So I have zero business background. I was a political science major at College of Charleston, and math is probably my worst suit of any of the majors. In my head, I'm imagining you go into business, you start a product, it's a good product, you're successful right away, and you sail off into the sunset, and I'm sitting on a porch on the Battery in my giant house, enjoying life. And part of it too is I went into it a little unprepared, where the sales were so good at my previous dealership that it was great money. I was 25, 26 years old, making six figures. You don't realize how very, very short of a time you can make that last when you start a business.
Yeah.
So start the company and got some money saved up. Like, this is enough to start the business. And slowly, as business expenses line up, mortgage payment lines up, and there's really not a lot of income coming in, because I'm, again, selling this out of the back of my truck with a bottle of mix with a logo on it that's hand drawn by a neighbor with no real, there's no real messaging to any of the brand. Yeah. And so the reality hit really quickly. We were talking, Aaron, probably the most challenging point during the initial startup was, I had this big mortgage on a house, and there came a point where I can no longer pay my mortgage and keep the business running. So probably the biggest reality check in the beginning was I was forced to make a decision like, hey, do you want to keep this house or do you want to keep the business going? Mm-hmm. So a conversation I had with some friends of mine that were in the private equity world, in the investment world, in the business world. I was so deep in the hole with the house, they basically just said, let it go. So that was one of the biggest struggles, was had a house foreclosed on by the time I was 27. But it was one of those things where I believed enough in the brand and into the business that I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. So this is the decision, and let's just keep plowing forward.
Yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs share with me that and I felt this before too, that it's one thing when it's you yourself as the founder and you're trying to move product and you're struggling and you're trying to juggle all these priorities. But the moment it starts to go a little bit well and you start to build a team around you, now you have this team of people that you've convinced to come work on your crazy idea. And it can often feel like there's so much more at risk, right? Like we have to worry about being able to pay those early team members or even give them enough work, right? We maybe hire people in front of demand that we hope is coming. What were those early kind of like starting to have some success, but, team building around you and then wondering if, this whole ship was going to continue to sail? What were those moments like?
I think, one of the most challenging parts in the very, very beginning was I started the business with a very good friend of mine. And once I left the dealership and had gone full-time with the business, he still had his previous job. So the challenge there was I'm trying to run it how I see fit. Mm-hmm. He is still working his other job. And so it became a point where we weren't seeing eye to eye. Mm-hmm. So he decided to step out. I bought him out for the small amount that the company was generating at the point. And so it started to strain relationships with friends, which was a big challenge. And so I went from having someone who really bounce ideas off of to now it's just me, mm-hmm. Which was a good thing too, because the only person relying on me was me at the time. so I didn't experience that much where it was other people as far as relying on me for an income or for business. That challenge wasn't as bad in the beginning as opposed to other startups that maybe go into it a little better capitalized, a little larger operation.
Yeah. What was, if you remember, what was your kind of annual revenue when you hired your first employee? Was it like 50,000, 100,000? When were you brave enough to actually bring somebody else into this crazy story who wasn't a founder with you, right?
So I was fortunate that the equity group that we partnered with, when there was a point where we realized, or I realized, that to grow this business, we had to do a full rebrand. We had to do new graphics package, and the mix itself wasn't that good. The first version, you've got a group of guys that made it in our kitchen, and so we knew that everything, or I knew everything had to be changed. So brought in a PE firm. Thankfully, the guy was another college Charleston guy that a few years ahead of me that had done incredibly well. So he was able to back up my sales with a kind of a front of the house staff. He, someone to keep track of the books, track all of the orders. So really fortunate that we were able to stay, a 3-person operation until about, I want to say maybe 2014, 2015. Before we needed to bring some additional people in. But
which is about funny, 5 years in, 2009 start.
4 years in.
4 or 5 years in. Wow.
Kind of outgrew, just me. And two, the challenge was when I knew we had to grow. You're pushing this product out. It's your baby. Nobody wants to tell you your baby's ugly. And so again, this is a mix that we made in the kitchen. I have limited bartending experience except for what I consume in front of the bartenders. And it was finally, I ran into a really good friend of mine that was in the bar business for 15 years. And he was literally across the bar at a breakfast place in Charleston. And he was the one that finally said to me, "Man, your mix sucks." And that was really kind of the slap in the face that, like, oh my God, I got to redo. If this is going to happen, we've got to redo everything.
Yeah.
And they couple that with not a lot of revenue coming in, exhausted all my resources. Next thing you know, the sheriff might be knocking on the door to pull me out of my house. It was probably the darkest time.
Yeah, so many of us feel that we start out with maybe a little bit of delusion around how easy this is going to be, and maybe get a little bit of early feedback that we project onto everyone else and assume that this thing is going to, go like crazy. And then the deeper we get into it, we start to realize, I'm sure with your business, like physical product, you have to produce it somewhere, you have to ship it, it can go bad, I'm assuming, since it's fresh and it's craft, and it, like all these problems that you start to think about, like these are not things that you thought of when you're that optimistic dreamer sitting there building the first version of the plan while, having a morning cocktail.
Yeah, I still remember one of the earliest mistakes I ever made when I was delivering it in my car. Because we're all natural and we don't have like any stabilizers in the mix, Charleston gets ungodly hot. And so if you leave a case of mix in your car for too long, the whole product's bad.
Yeah.
So, I would travel around Charleston, and let's say I run into a restaurant owner that wants to talk for a while and my car is heating up for 2 hours. I've now got 6 cases of mix that are no longer good, that I didn't realize that until we had dropped a few more of them off, and I'm getting phone calls and, what is this? So, yeah, that was an eye opener. How much heat can ruin a product.
Yeah, it's an interesting combination of selling a fresh product in the scorching hot South for a fresh summer drink. Yeah. So one of the things you and I talked about is like how many entrepreneurs feel like they're just going through this alone. You mentioned it, a minute ago, right? When you had a founder kind of in the beginning and then parted ways and you moved forward with the business. So, we always feel as entrepreneurs like we need to project success. So everyone thinks we're moving in the right direction, no matter how much we might actually be struggling. So in the most challenging moments when you were doing everything possible to focus and grow and expand, did you feel like you had to keep challenges to yourself? Like, what was that effect on you personally in these hard times?
It's 100% accurate, because as you're launching a product, you want to portray to everyone around you that things are going great, the product's successful, everything is blue skies and sailing ahead. And meanwhile, you you've got this oncoming train of all these responsibilities that are lining up that maybe you can't succeed at. So I think the biggest challenge for me was trying to portray the successful image outwardly, knowing that, hey, we're a month to 2 months away from this thing not happening, to it being over. And I really had nothing else lined up after the Bloody Mary mix. I had left college immediately, went to a job at a car dealership. So internally, I'm stressing out that my skill set isn't developed enough to, now I'm going to fold up this Bloody Mary mix company. I've now got a failure on my hands. What am I going to do now that my peer group has already moved on. They're at the second level of their medical device sales jobs or their construction companies they've started. Now I'm back to square one while also having a failed Bloody Mary company.
And a lot of spoiling Bloody Mary mix.
Yes, a lot of it.
That you don't know what to do with. Yeah, I felt this so similarly. So our stories are similar in that I started my kind of early software companies in my last years of college and then kind of in the first years following it. And I had those same moments kind of 2 to 5 years after college where I thought this startup was going to take off quickly and things were going pretty well. We had, maybe $250,000 of revenue and a small team. But the future was really uncertain and none of that money was coming to me. I was maybe buying myself expensing a lunch every once in a while. And, the options for me as a computer science graduate, undergrad from Carolina were to go get a job at IBM and Microsoft, which paid a ton of money if you could get it. And then a lot of other folks that I knew that were thinking about business in college went and took consulting jobs and were living in big cities, making a lot of money, probably below the poverty line because of the cost to live in those cities, but it was at least a lot of money and they were taking nice vacations and they were racking up hotel points. And here I am going to quarter wing night at Jersey Mike's because that's all I can afford. Right. And there's this moment of gosh, I thought I was smart and was going to try and be successful. But in this moment, I'm now last place and it's painful to look ahead. And it certainly, I think also fed that, my ability to have a honest conversation with my peers. I didn't really want to let those people know that the path I was on was kind of miserable and I was really broke compared to them. Right. And in that moment, they looked a lot smarter than me.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's inherently a competitive nature in a lot of people that that are going to starting your own business. You want to win, you want to make your business succeed, and so you couple that with typically you surround your peer group you surround yourself with, or if you're a successful person, they're usually doing pretty well. So as you watch them kind of lap where you think you should be, I found myself getting more reserved in how much I would open up about how challenging things are, because you want to keep it close to the chest. You don't want to let them know that, wow, I'm not doing anywhere close to what you're doing, and it's embarrassing to admit.
Yeah, the value of later in my career finding these places like Entrepreneurs Organization and just other areas where entrepreneurs come together and talk about real things in their lives. I didn't discover till probably 5-6 years into my business journey, and that was a huge wake-up call for me. I said, wow, there's actually a safe place where I can go talk with other entrepreneurs about how good it is sometimes and also how bad it is sometimes. I think one of my favorite descriptions from that group was, if you've just closed a huge client and made $100,000, sometimes you don't want to tell your friends that too, because you're going to get stuck with the drink tab for the next 2 months. So it's not always the bad things that we don't share with everybody else and the folks 100%. Around us. It's good to have that counsel. One of the things that I've learned and many of our members have learned on our journey is the importance of working to our strengths, right? No one person's perfectly suited to execute every one of the very large tasks associated with building a business. You talked about not having, background in consumer products and in beverages, even in business, right? So tell us a bit about what you've learned, particularly around the time you were starting to scale this business that might serve as good advice for those of us just kind of starting on the journey.
One of the things, not tooting my own horn, but I do realize what I'm not good at and what I am good at. Mm-hmm. So I've been fortunate that the partnership I have with our PE group, they're very good at identifying what I'm good at and what I could use this help in. And so the challenge is always saying, maybe I'm not the best equipped to put these together, or to put like this report together, or prepare, a presentation for a meeting with Publix or Kroger. Need this stuff. I'm very good with them face to face and on the sales side, and showing the passion about the brand we built. So I think it was about 2015, the PE group brought in someone they had worked with before, whose skill set wasn't completely opposite of mine, but it meshed very well. It filled in some gaps that I had. And so the challenge at first is kind of accepting the fact that, hey, this person's coming in to help you. They're not your enemy. Our interests are aligned. We all want to make this thing succeed. So don't be too proud to take their help. And so once that was kind of, and again, as the founder of the business, this is my baby. I don't want to give anyone else any control that it would be taken away from me. But once kind of getting past that pridefulness, the person we brought in, Matt, we went from 250 retail accounts to, over the course of 4 years, we got into 6,000 new accounts. And we were at a certain point where every meeting we would go to with a Harris Teeter or a Publix or a Whole Foods, or we would do our presentation and we'd come out of the meeting and we'd get the business. And it was great because we were able to play off each other's strengths. And again, it was realizing, when we're in these meetings and I'm rambling on about the mix and how great it is, and they ask a question about, all right, well, how much can you allocate to the startup marketing budget when we put you in our stores? And I'm dumbfounded. He's able to jump right in and answer those questions immediately. So the partnerships like that, we were able to scale the business incredibly quickly. We were in a great space as far as being a craft premium brand when there weren't a lot out there, and then being in the right place at the right time. And it just, luck had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Your story is incredible, Ryan, because there's two things that you've mentioned so far here that I think are some of the scariest things that any entrepreneur could ever imagine starting out, right? Like, what if I lose my house? Like, my life will be over. This will be devastating. And what if I, become successful and have investors join me in this business, and then they bring somebody, let's say forced, I know you didn't say that word, but they bring in somebody to help with operations to kind of be a partner of yours. Like, that's terrifying to most founders. Like, my investors are going to force things on me. I might lose my house. Like, that's the definition of failure to so many entrepreneurs. And here you are telling us that, and you've got this incredible brand that's leading your market. And that is also your path to getting there.
Yeah, it's tough, for people that are like the private equity space is very tough, right? You hit a point where, again, house is getting ready to go bye-bye. I need money to keep this brand going. So you're pigeonholed where you've got to get someone to back you. And I was fortunate that the partnership that, I've been with now for 9 years has been very much about this brand. How do we make this brand successful? Our interests are aligned, but we also recognize that this business was built by this founder. So let's make sure we don't take away and force our will upon it. I remember, especially coming out of how the lows I was in, I was in the private equity group's offices in Atlanta, and I had just gotten word back from Harris Teeter, which was our first major grocery chain that we had started in. And I'd formed a really good relationship with the buyer over their mixer brands. And we would, go back and forth. And she finally emails me one day or calls me one day, and she says, "Hey, I'm going to put you in all of our stores," which for us was huge. We were only in their, coastal market. So I call her back and I'm like, "Hey, I've looked at our distribution map. I can get into 85% of them with our current distributor relationships." She's like, "Well, it's either all or nothing. I can't do a hodgepodge." So I I piece this whole thing together, get a new distributor in North Carolina that can do it for us. But over a 2-week period, I don't communicate with her because I'm so nervous about losing the deal. And so I happen to be in Atlanta, and I'm with our private equity group, and we're talking about the Harris Teeter deal. And I'm like, I just finally got it all pieced together. I need to let them know. And the private equity, his face is like, well, does she know yet? I'm like, well, I haven't told her. And she's like, call her right now on the conference call. So hits the speaker button. We call her up. Karen, I got the deal put together. We can be in all of your stores. And she goes, Ryan, I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. The deal's off.
Oh my
And my face turned like the same color of the bricks behind you.
God.
And the private equity guy is giving me, as soon as we hang up, I'm throwing you off the roof of this building. It felt like she waited 10 minutes. It was maybe 4 seconds. And she goes, Ryan, I'm just effing with you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was probably like the first heart attack I had as a 30-year-old.
Brutal.
Yeah,
Absolutely brutal.
but it was one of those extreme highs, extreme lows. And so it was one of the funnest experiences looking back. That was our first big kind of win, getting those guys. So it was an interesting way to get it, though.
One of my good entrepreneur friends out here in Boulder, Bart Foster, says, he said, when I started my first company, he was actually in Atlanta, so in the Southeast as well. And he said, I started my first company, I knew that I was going to experience some high highs and some low lows. What I didn't know was that they were going to happen in the same day and multiple times a day often.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate analysis of what we experienced, that emotional roller coaster in entrepreneurship. So we talked a lot about the challenges. I love that story as well. Now with this massively successful product under your belt, you've had some moments, I'm sure, where you're like, this is real. Like, it's finally going the way I want it to go. Your idea has gone from your kitchen to thousands of stores and bars across the country. What are some of the best and happiest moments along the way? Like the moments when you knew this was real and could just sit in it and be excited about it?
I think, I can think specifically of two where it was the most rewarding. The first one we had gotten, we'd entered the product into the Garden Gun's a really strong Southern branded magazine.
Mm-hmm.
They do a Made in the South Awards. They just started it. So we had entered the product into their food category for best new food product. And we're up against some incredibly strong brands. And Sean Brock, who's a well-known chef here, he started Husk, and he was the judge of the food category. And we didn't know, it was right after we had launched the new product, so it really had no idea how it was gonna do. And enter it, and we get a call back from them about a month later. Hey, you guys have done well. You may be featured in the magazine as a runner-up. And about 2 weeks prior to the magazine coming out, they told us we had won the best overall food product in the South for the Made in South Award, and that was just incredibly powerful. This is a real magazine telling us that we had come up with a great product. I think the second one is probably the encompassing of, you forget what you're putting out there is an actual real product, and there are people on the other end that are consuming it, that are passionate about the brand. So it's funny, Howie is on the call with us, and one of the coolest things, you go to these food and wine fests, and you've got people that come up to you and they tell you how much they love your product and what big fans they are. You see them every year for 4 years, and they just love your product. And it literally, you take a step back, and it's so rewarding to know that you came out with something great. People really, really do like it. And then you get to meet formulate relationships with customers that are real. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, that's probably been the most rewarding part of what we've been able to accomplish so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And for folks that don't know, the Charleston Food and Wine Festival is one of the coolest ways to experience new products. Living in North Carolina the last 20 years, had the opportunity to go down once or twice, and just an incredible event, an incredible food event. And if you like spicy food or delicious food or Southern culture, next level. So I want to talk about, we talked about connection, a minute ago, and kind of like not feeling alone. At Founders First, and as in our community, in the system itself, or in our course, we're constantly talking about supporting each other, understanding the challenges we all face. We talk about entrepreneurship, fact versus fiction, a lot. What people think that we should be experiencing, what we're actually experiencing. The impression of like popular culture and what entrepreneurship is supposed to be. You've worked incredibly hard to take this idea all the way through to an amazing product and company. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are just getting started about how to focus on what matters the most?
I think that, the biggest thing that I always look back to is, and again, this is for our space, and I think it translates, is, identify what may be a gap in the market you're trying to go into.
Mm-hmm.
For us, there was really only one good competitor out there. So we knew there was a space, or I knew there was a space for a premium brand,
Mm-hmm.
well made, that's marketed well. The second thing that I look back to is it's got to be a great product. There's only so much lipstick you can put on a pig, and I realized that very, very quickly with with the first version of it.
Mm-hmm.
We getting it out into the marketplace. A lot of the bars and restaurants that were taking it, they were taking it because we branded it Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
I was a relatively good salesman, so I could get them to, kind of like the Pepsi challenge. They would taste it and, oh, just a little bit of it. Yeah, this is great. But the product wasn't that good in comparison to other products out there. So honing your product until you think it can go up against whatever competitor that's in your space, and you feel confident about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to overstate the importance of being confident in your brand. Nowadays when we try to get restaurants, big restaurant groups to pick us up, one of the things we kind of shied away from the beginning, and then we said, why don't we just go head to head with our competitors? So one of the big things we'll do now is if we go into a restaurant and some of them give us a little pushback, we grab the bartending staff or the wait staff. We have them pour samples of whatever they're currently pouring, and we have them do a taste test against our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a chance that we're going to get shot down, but more often than not, we win the taste test. And so the confidence in our brand and knowing that we have a great product, I think that's one of the things that has helped propel us forward, is not shying away from that and making it the best it can possibly be.
Yeah, I see in that there's an incredible bravery in you. First of all, to be able to notice in the early days, or just listen to people when they told you the product wasn't that great, and to be able to iterate on it. I mean, it takes a great deal of humility to not want to just say kind of screw you to people that give you that feedback.
I said screw you a few times. It took a few slaps in the face before I finally sat back and realized it needed to be fixed.
Yeah, I love that. All right, let's go to questions from the audience. So if you have a question that's been kind of brewing in your mind or something that popped up so far, drop it in the chat right now. We've got a little bit of time and left to be able to take in some questions. So first one's from Jessica, and it's kind of about this product quality side of it. She said, would love to hear advice for startups who are creating a new product to bring it to the market. You talked about your original mix needing to be redone. How can entrepreneurs start strong with a product that exceeds expectations? I might add to that as well. Do you have to? Should you? Does it have to be right the first time?
So it's very tough to not be right the first time. When we tried to relaunch the brand after having already been in the market, if it hadn't been for the Garden and Gun Made in the South Award, I don't know that we could have successfully gotten it back out there. Because you're going back to, hey Aaron, I know you've already been trying to sell our mix and it didn't go well. Give me another shot. Mm-hmm. But I can go in there with the Garden and Gun magazine with a testimonial from Sean Brock saying, hey, this is the best mix he's ever tasted. That for sure allowed us to have a second chance.
Yeah.
One of the ways we made sure we started strong with the rebrand is we took, for 7 months, working in collaboration with a good friend Boris and Jackson that are recipe guys. For 7 months, we would craft a version of the new recipe, and I would go to a Total Wine right out here in West Ashley, and I would bring jugs of our mix, and I would buy a bottle of every competing brand of Bloody Mary mix on the shelf. And Total Wine was cool enough to allow me to do an in-house taste test. So sat there with a rudimentary, consumer satisfaction survey, and eventually got to a point where we were winning 75% of the taste test. In the Bloody Mary space, to get 75% of people on the same page is it's very, very tough because everyone's palates are different. So we said 75% was good enough for us. But yeah, I mean, we had 7 months of, in essence, R&D to make sure that we had it right. Because you launch it once and it's not that great, you can come back from that. A second relaunch, not that great. I don't know that you survive that.
Yeah. Is there any way to quantify like money spent on retooling, coming back at it again? Like, let's say you happen to have gotten it right the first time. How many months, how many dollars would you have saved if you had done it that way instead?
So the actual the formulation wasn't really the expensive part. It was the branding.
Okay.
So one of the pieces of advice I would give to someone looking to start their own business is, the branding is incredibly important. And even if you don't want to spend a fortune on it, I wouldn't recommend like going to a neighbor and having them hand draw something. The investment in kind of your graphic design package and marketing your brand and branding your brand is important. And so for us, we partnered with this incredible firm here in Charleston that's got a national reputation, and it was expensive. I mean, we spent well into the six figures on the rebrand, on the marketing campaign, which we would have spent anyway if we had launched it the right way the first time. So I'm not advocating for anyone that's starting a business to go out and make that kind of investment. But I do recognize, looking back at our first version of everything, even if we had spent a tenth of that just to make sure we looked decent in the beginning, it could have helped.
Do you think is brand, it's a loaded question, but is brand good enough to make up for a product that's 80% as good as it should be? Like, do those two things, can they work hand in hand that way? Or you got to nail them both?
A strong branding will get you so far.
Yeah.
After that, you're just a good looking bottle that sits on the shelf.
Yeah.
We always joke like, hey, our bottle and our ads can get someone to buy at least one bottle of the mix. But once they crack that bottle open, if they're not repurchasing, we're fooling ourselves. So yeah, great branding, great marketing can overcome a lot of issues, but ultimately, if the product isn't good, or at least the consumers don't like it, you're only going to get so far.
I love that. That's an incredible insight. All right, next question is from Dan. He said you mentioned the addition of the colleague who really helped you scale. I think you said something for like a couple hundred stores to 6,000 points of distribution. Were you able to be more open with him about the challenges in, like how tough it was on you as an entrepreneur to build a business, or was this really kind of like a business partnership?
So it started very, very matter of fact, very business. But the great thing about having Matt in so closely with the operation is he got to see the challenges every day. He knew the stresses that we were under, I was under, trying to scale this thing. And so as we built the business up, our relationship also became great. And so we would talk literally 7 times a day. It would start with business conversations, and then it would go into, hey, well, how are you doing? What's going on down there in Charlotte? So it really, I think him being in the trenches with me was probably the best outlet that I had, bar none, even amongst close friends, because I could be 100% honest with everything. Yeah.
That's an incredible partnership. I've seen that go both ways in my own companies and in friends' companies, where sometimes those relationships stay very strict. But you're right, there's this huge opportunity for somebody that knows so much about you because of the time you spend together and your current mind state and your situation, as well as the business, right? They can probably have a little bit of insight into, I might know why Ryan's not feeling great today because I saw the news yesterday, or I got the call too, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's nice to have someone, for all our successes that we had as a team, there were some pretty big challenges, some kicks in the nuts. And so having somebody and I think this is true for relationships and marriages, that having somebody that you can just take your guard down and be like, man, that really sucks, or that was really, really hard to put all this work into it, and we didn't get the deal we thought we were going to get, or we just got beat up pretty hard by the private equity guys, and that was that was just not a great meeting. I'm not feeling so hot after it. That made a huge difference. I think for me, like emotional toll wise, just having someone like him that's right there in it with you was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that concept of it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and that's just
100%.
Yeah. I posted a little meme to the Founders First community the other day that I found hilarious. It was one of those signs in front of restaurants that, the owners probably change every week with something else funny. And it said, it's okay to fall apart sometimes. Tacos fall apart all the time and everybody still loves them.
Yeah.
Loved it. All right. Next question is from Morali. When you got your product into so many stores, so you talked about this big expansion, the question is you had to finance the inventory yourself, right? Retailers only pay for what you sell. How did you handle the finances and cash flow in an expansion like that, where you've got to build products and then let it sit on shelves, right? Where you're still paying for it till it sells.
So we, in the way we're structured, that a lot of beverage brands are, is the distributor pays us for product once they pick it up, and they build a retailer. But we've got to pay for production of the product prior to them picking up. So you've got a six-figure lag, and we we've been fortunate that our PE group that backs us really had monitored that from the very beginning. And so they made sure that we were liquid enough, that checks weren't getting bounced, that we could, until a point we built up our cash reserves, that we could, now everything's running smoothly. But in that situation, the PE firm came in and they were the ones that were able to keep us moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Otherwise, with my math skills, it would be like
back to selling cars to try and cover the cash flow deficit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which might have worked actually. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, cash crunch is such a huge critical problem in so many businesses, and even in high margin companies where, like my background in software, we're producing ones and zeros. We still have a lot of R&D cost on the front side, but in physical product businesses like yours, where you've got to buy the ingredients, they're fresh, they have to move quickly from a supply chain efficiently. You've got to make product, bottle it, and then get it picked up and shipped again. I mean, the complexity and the amount of cash you can have outlaid in order to grow, I think makes a lot of sense why I'm sure you made that decision intentionally to bring in a capital partner like that, because I can't imagine how you do it otherwise. There's just, you grow a lot slower, I guess. You grow much slower.
There's a lot of confidence that comes in being able to know that, hey, we struck a deal with Publix tomorrow, and they put in an order for 15,000 cases of mix. We've got the capacity and the resources to fulfill that order.
Yeah.
It takes a huge unknown out of your mind, and gives you a lot of confidence going into that meeting. Hey, let's shoot for the moon. Let's ask for 4 facings all over their stores. Let's see how much we can get, because we can fulfill it. So that was something that really, really helped going into these meetings and growing the business.
Yeah, incredible position to be making decisions on top of. Incredible platform. All right, so Ian asked a question back to kind of personal relationships and support again. So outside of people that you worked with, what is your kind of like social fabric as an entrepreneur? Is it friends, family? Like, who are the other people you've turned to in your path when times haven't been great and you needed to pick up as an entrepreneur?
So I've got a really close group of friends that I've had since my college Charleston days that stayed pretty much consistent. Dan's brother, John, is a close friend of mine. And so there's been a very good core group, and a lot of these guys are entrepreneurs in themselves. They own their own real estate business, they own their own construction company. So they've been a good steady source of letting my guard down and being able to bounce ideas off of them. And when things were rough, they really were kind of the backbone to say, hey, you're going to get out of this. You're going to figure your way out of it. Worst case scenario, this whole thing goes belly up. You can live in my guest room. So that safety net was really great. And it's something that I'm very, very cognizant of how fortunate it is to have that. Because I couldn't imagine as an entrepreneur, if you always think about worst case scenario, if this whole thing goes belly up, my house is foreclosed on, I have no money left. If I didn't have the safety net of knowing it all goes away tomorrow and I could go move in with my parents, that there's something to be said about knowing that at the worst possible case scenario, you can't fail that bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and it just can't be overstated. That's why for people without that kind of safety net that are still able to do it, I mean, I have the utmost respect for what they've been through and the challenges. You're operating without a safety net. It's a tight wire act without a safety net.
Yeah. All right, folks, we've got time for probably one more question. I've got one that's kind of top of mind for me, Ryan, which is the kind of keeping balance in your life. It's interesting because you're an entrepreneur. When you and I talked recently as well, the stress of selling product from the back of the truck, working incredible hours, doing all this heavy lifting yourself as you're starting. And you're also in an industry that's kind of food and beverage and, a product that pairs with alcohol. And I'm sure that leads to obviously lots of nights out selling product to 2 a.m, right? And it's not like maybe selling software 9 to 5 or even selling cars like before. This is an industry that's known to go really hard and have really hard hours. So you've been faced with challenges for keeping yourself balanced, keeping your mood up, keeping your energy up across this. What are just some tips that you could share with other entrepreneurs? How do you stay energized? How do you stay healthy in the midst of what this type of business even requires of an entrepreneur?
It's a really good point you make as far as the food and beverage industry is fraught with alcoholism, depression, and so there's some groups in this space that have been formed. They recognize that and they take the stigma away from that's always associated with any kind of addiction. So those are a really good outlet. For me, I've got a lab that I'll find myself on days where things are maybe going a little sideways. I usually allot an hour a day at least, throw in the headphones, put on whether it's Howard Stern or something to take my mind off, some comedy. And it sounds simplistic, but for me, it works. I do an hour-long walk in Charleston with the dog.
Yeah.
And just completely put my phone on Do Not Disturb, so I'm not getting texts or phone calls. And the ability if you are to unplug for an hour a day, and just kind of let it all go for a moment if you can, for me has been something that's been a great stress reliever. I can't say that I had that kind of wherewithal 5 years ago. I for sure was caught up in the food and bev. You're drinking with all of your customers. So looking back now, times were good, but it was also a dark place as far as consumption and kind of not recognizing my own issues when I need to take a step back and the demons you're dealing with.
Yeah. Ryan, thank you so much for your time. This has been incredible, and this story is just absolutely amazing. We're all eager to see your continued success, and I'm sure we've all got Bloody Marys on the brain. So I saw a few people raising a glass along the way in the gallery view here. So cheers to everybody.
If you need a Bloody Mary, I know a guy.
Yeah, exactly. Enjoy a Charleston Bloody Mary.
Aaron, I appreciate it. It was a blast, and really great talking to you, and look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here, and thanks for your candor. We're just happy to see you, have you in our community, and look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.